This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Doc here for the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. Thank you for your continued support and allowing us to keep the studio lights on, the microphones hot here at the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. If you like what you're listening to, you like the variety of podcasts that you hear, definitely check out our website, DetroitSportsPodcast.com. That's the easiest way to support us. You get all the news from the network. You can check out the work from Vito, myself, all the guys that are putting out great content almost each and every day. And hey, if you're prone to shop online, click through that Amazon banner, go about your business, shop, and then when you're on that Amazon page, just bookmark it. Anytime at all that you make an online purchase, it kicks us back a little something and helps us keep this project going. We've been going strong since 2013, and that's been largely due to the support of our supporters, and we greatly appreciate it. DetroitSportsPodcast.com.
And welcome to the freshest, the latest edition of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. I'm your host, as usual, Vito Chirco, alongside my sidekick, my partner in crime, let's say that as well, about the Doc from Doc and Jock. That is John Macaroon. John, how's it going today?
Vito, I think it's time to get a new title. I think you should call me just Doc from the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
You don't like me saying Doc from Doc and Jock. You are the Doc of the Detroit Sports Podcast Network, and all hail the Doc. Let me just bow down to you at all cost. Whenever you call upon me to do that, I will do that for you going forward, Doc.
Now, before we get to the baseball news and notes, I'm really excited to see what's been going on. I've been a little bit football heavy, but I know on Tuesdays we get a chance to talk about baseball, see where you're at with things with the Detroit Tigers, with the AL Central. But today, you know, like a good executive producer, like a good podcast, you know, entrepreneur, I picked you up today to get you here.
Very nice.
To the Sterling Heights studios. But I showed up and the door wasn't open. You were not ready. What were you doing before I got there?
Well, by the way, I'm never ready, no matter what the situation may be, no matter what day of the week it may be, and how much time I take for preparation ahead of time. I still won't be ready for you right away to get out the door when you drive up the driveway. The thing is, I think you're a little bit impatient, though, too. I probably have too much patience, and you're way too impatient. We have to find that nice middle ground. If we found that nice medium, we probably would be great, you know, all-star podcasters and all-star human beings. Well, it's important to be an all-star human being, and for the Tigers as well, but also to be all-star players on the playing field. And the thing is, we can talk about it ad nauseum. It's about whether or not they can consistently be that, the majority of the roster in 2017. And still doubts are out there. And guess what, guys? Spring training is now rapidly approaching. You have pitchers and catchers beginning to report to spring training camps on February 13th throughout both Arizona and Florida. Tigers play in Lakeland, Florida during the spring. There's also the World Baseball Classic this spring. And guess what? It's something that I want to watch actually the night of this recording. We record on Tuesdays. And Tuesday night, there's a great documentary about Jim Leyland coming out on MLB Network. Almost forgot about it. And Barry Bonds is interviewed in that. He is rarely interviewed because he hates the media. The media hates him. So that's a huge, like a monumental note about Jim Leyland, that he would be willing to be interviewed by the media when he never does interviews. It speaks highly in so many words of Jim Leyland, what he did as a manager in his big league career.
No doubt. You said it's on Major League Baseball Network?
MLB Network, Tuesday night, I believe at 9 p.m. on MLB Network. And you know it will be on replay too. Must-watch in my opinion, because Jim Leyland is a must-watch manager. How about the antics? And how much did you love Jim Leyland? Because for me, he was my favorite Tiger skipper of all time, because I never saw him winning baseball until 2006 when he came on board. So for me, the best of all time for Tiger skippers by far. Of the guys that I've seen since my birth year of 93. But hey, slim pickings too of the managers we've had before Jim Leyland, and most notably after, the one guy in Brad Ausmus that we've had after Jim Leyland, who should not be around after this upcoming campaign. Doc?
Listen, since Sparky Anderson, there weren't really that many great Tigers managers, but what Jim Leyland was able to do was really form a great relationship with Dave Dombrowski, and they were able to change the culture. And I think why many people in Detroit gravitated towards Jim Leyland was he was a blue-collar guy. You felt like he was one of us. And I really believe that the post-game comments that he made after a series, when he came out and said, listen, this kind of lack of effort kind of thing going on here, I know it's been here, it's been present in the past, it stops now. And once he said that 2006 season kind of took off, and you really felt like, whoa, we got a serious manager here who may take these players and may make everybody accountable. And that's what he was. He was no gruff, and he was serious. And I think that's what many people like in town. They like, whether you agree or not, whether you agree that a manager or a coach should be fiery or not, I think that fans gravitate towards people that we feel are really invested in it, that we feel are going to go out there and hold people accountable and have a track record. We got to remember, Jim Leyland came here winning a World Series, with the Florida Marlins. And so when he comes here, he instantly has respect. And I really feel like right now in the world of Detroit sports, I don't believe many people respect the managers or the coaches around because Jim Caldwell, no rings. Brad Ausmus, no rings, probably never will get a ring. Stan Van Gundy got his basketball team to the finals, but he had a historic spat with a star player. And many people still feel like, hey, he's got a lot to prove. And Jim Caldwell, well, he got to the Super Bowl, but many people feel he was outcoached in that Super Bowl, by Sean Payton. So, and you got to remember, we also had a time where there were some great coaches in Detroit. Larry Brown, Scotty Bowman, Jim Leyland. And to go from that group of coaches to what we got now, I just think that we need, if you want to ask what's the singular thing Detroit sports needs, they need better managers, world-class managers to come here and pick up the teams from the doldrums. And Jim Leyland was a guy that did that, got the Detroit Tigers to 2 World Series and was able to have strong success. Unfortunately, just didn't get the ring here in town.
Rough and tough he was, wasn't he? And a baseball lifer. Now, the thing is, people got on him, though, too, about the fact that he was too non-modern with his thinking. He wasn't analytical, didn't use sabermetrics or numbers enough. So, people slammed him for that and wanted him out, but it feels like now they would love to have Jim Leyland back in the place of Brad Ausmus. So, how much do we have to take into account that part of Jim Leyland's managerial career that he never really got on board with the analytical movement that's now intact today?
Yeah, you got me thinking. Towards the end of his tenure, the number one thing people would look at is his lineups. We would pick it apart because there'd be days where you needed a victory and Miguel Cabrera would be rested. And you just wondered, what are you doing with your lineup night in, night out? And I just felt like he maybe overly relied upon Don Kelly and put in his role players in situations where maybe many felt like he could have put somebody else who was producing at a better clip. And he actually would get mad at the media. He would say, listen, if you want to pick apart my lineup, you do the job. But, it's just one of those things where towards the end, you maybe felt like he could have done a better job using sabermetrics. That is a weakness against him, but do you feel like that was the single greatest mark and knock against Jim Leyland was the fact that he didn't really use sabermetrics, was more of a feel kind of guy?
That was a big blow for me because I see no other negatives, and I'm probably biased because I love Jim Leyland, the guy that he was too, and he was a character and a good man, a good baseball man, but also a good man off the field. He would buy rounds of shots or drinks for people at bars in like Grosse Pointe. He had like a spot that he would frequent. I never went, wasn't old enough back then. Maybe was spotted in a bar before 21 though myself, but that's for another day. Anyways, though, he was that kind of guy that was willing to give and to talk to you. He would make time for media members, for just fans, average Joes like you and I, Doc, who are now media members, I know, too. But you get my drift, I think, guys.
Oh, you consider me a media member?
You are, and I think we're both media folks now. I don't know how big of media folk we are. But anyways, Leyland was an all-around great guy, classy guy. He loved the city of Detroit. He loved that hustle from the city of Detroit, how we are built for tough. We are, just tough, hard-nosed individuals that will, go to work, get our jobs done, and do what it takes to put, food on the table for our families. And Leyland really, I think, embraced that himself, and he was that type of dude himself. He embraced that kind of mentality, and those Tigers teams from 06 to 2013 definitely embraced that mentality as well. But one other thing to comment on Jim Leyland is, 06, 2012, he made 2 World Series appearances, as you noted, Doc, before, but lost both World Series trips. In 06 and 5 games, got swept in 2012 to the San Francisco Giants. Both teams you could look at and say were lesser ball clubs than the Tigers when they made the World Series, both of those campaigns. Especially in 06, when the Tigers won 95 games as a wild card. They didn't win the division because the Twins came on later in the season. The Tigers choked the lead away, but still made the wild card, won 95 games, and only lost a game in the playoffs before the World Series against a team in the Cardinals, a team managed by Tony La Russa, a guy that Leyland coached under with the Chicago White Sox. And the Tigers were kind of the favorites. I don't know if they were heavy favorites. Cardinals had the experience on their side, but the Cards had only won 83 ball games prior to that 06 Fall Classic. So it was a very disappointing end to see the Tigers go out in 5 games in that Fall Classic because of that factor, Doc. Now, with those 2 disappointing ends to the 06 and 2012 campaigns and to the Fall Classics in those respective seasons specifically, how much does that weigh on the legacy of Jim Leyland and or diminish the legacy that he established for himself in Motown as Tiger skipper?
Well, I guess the thing that many people looked at was the power outage in 2006. Many felt like they had the better team, but the week off, it just seemed like they were never able to regain that magic in the World Series versus St. Louis. I felt like had they played maybe a day or two later, they might have been able to do some things, maybe earn a game or two more. The series versus the Giants was really equally surprising because you felt like once the team got there to the World Series in both occasions, you never really felt like they had an imprint, like they belonged. It felt like in 2012 that the team was the favorite and was playing better than the Giants, but they came in and were just dominant and played so well, and the Tigers weren't able to match them. And then what did you notice? You saw mistakes in the fielding. You saw a lot of mental errors. You saw the offense go cold. It was inconsistent. And so both appearances in the World Series were really disappointing in the way the Tigers exited because they really didn't leave an imprint. They won 1 game in 2 World Series, winning 1 game versus the St. Louis Cardinals and getting swept, and having the San Francisco Giants celebrate at Comerica Park was pretty tough and pretty devastating in the likes. And so because you really felt like, well, maybe there wasn't going to be too many more opportunities. I felt like the 2013 team, 2014 teams had solid opportunities, but again, those teams had major holes in the bullpen. So it's just one of those things where Jim Leyland did a great job. You give him credit for taking the teams to the World Series. It would have been nice had he won it, and I felt like he probably, if he looked back at it, might have done a couple things differently. Maybe the decision with Kenny Rogers and Justin Verlander might have gone a little bit different in 2006, but you give him credit because you got to remember the Tigers came from the bottom. Imagine any head coach taking the Detroit Lions to the Super Bowl. You would give him immense
They'd be a legend
credit.
Forever here in Motown, definitely. And Jim Leyland, I think, he gained that reputation as well in that respect.
If he gets a grade from me, it's an A-.
I was going to ask you, look at that. You already answered my question before I even asked the question. I would have to grade a little bit harsher, even though I bet I love him more than you do. But I would have to give him a B+. Now, great in 06 because 3 years prior, losing 119 games in a single season, horrible. They were epically bad. One of the best, the best teams at being bad of all time, worst ball clubs of all time in Major League Baseball history back in 03. And then 3 years later to make the World Series when nobody expected it to happen, still really a relatively young core that ball club was or contained. And to get to the Fall Classic, that was an achievement in itself, and nobody really was disappointed in the outcome of that Fall Classic because they had reached a World Series when nobody saw it coming. Now, in 2012, people thought, well, once they reached the Fall Classic, well, they were going to win it for sure. They were due to win, and they got swept and left a sour taste in our mouths. And Leyland always had the trouble, too, with managing lineups, not using advanced stats to determine his lineups on a daily basis, and that hurt the ball club significantly at times, and to a lesser magnitude at times as well. And I think it was more of that less magnitude than people believed and, proclaimed it to be. So I gave Leyland a lot of slack throughout the years. And there's also, if you want to bring it up, back in 2012 against the Bronx Bombers, Jose Valverde, he let go out there when Valverde wasn't his sharpest, was pretty much past his prime, and he blew a save to the Yankees. Do you remember the Yankees in that series against the Tigers in 2012? Raul Ibanez, who I think was already 40-something at that point, hit a home run. But then they went to extras in that one game of that series against the Yanks. Derek Jeter, remember, got hurt eventually because it went into extras. It was almost a blessing in disguise that he got hurt because the Tigers won that series and made the trip to the Fall Classic. But those 2 series losses, as much as he did in terms of achievements, those series losses will always define him as well as Tigers skipper, Doc.
Well, Brad Ausmus is the current manager. You never know what's going to happen. I really believe if the Tigers struggle, there may be an opportunity for Alavila to make a move. But if Brad Ausmus could channel one thing, if he could reach out and take one thing from Jim Leyland, because by all accounts you hear that they do talk, they do consult. Jim Leyland is a special consultant to the Tigers. If Brad Ausmus could take one trait from Jim Leyland, what would it be to make him a better manager? Because Detroit Tigers, man, they need a good manager right now because many people aren't confident in Brad Ausmus.
Bring back Jim Leyland. There's your answer right now. But he's managing Team USA in the World Baseball Classic, and my confidence level in Leyland, even right now at 70-plus years old, would be sky high compared to Brad Ausmus. And Ausmus, my confidence level is still very low, and I can't change it until I see the Tigers, him specifically improve upon his managerial habits from the past.
Was that
3
you
seasons.
deflecting a question from the doc? The question wasn't bring back Jim Leyland, obviously.
I know. I was talking about...
What one trait do you think Brad Ausmus could take from Jim Leyland to make him a better manager? Is it just...
Well, you switch bodies. You give Brad Ausmus the Jim Leyland mind. But one trait he could take specifically from Jim Leyland is, I think... See, he's calm, cool, and collective. Leyland was more fiery, brought the passion more when he had you. I think I want that out of Brad Ausmus, honestly. I want more of that out of Brad Ausmus. Thing is that you can't teach Brad Ausmus is all the experience that Jim Leyland had on his side going into 06 and in his whole entire managerial career with the Tigers from 06 to 2013. Ausmus doesn't have that on his side, to work in his favor. Now, he has 3 years going into this 4th season as Tiger skipper, 3 years prior under his belt of managerial experience now in Major League Baseball. But still, is it enough to tell me, and based on what he's shown so far to the masses, the front office, to the Tigers fans, he hasn't shown enough to say that he's learned from his experiences extensively. Now, I think he improved a little bit in his 3rd year as skipper. It was good to see him get fiery at times, and he waited, though, to do some stuff, some lineup changes. He waited way too long, and Leyland would do that as well, so he was at fault for that as well. So it's hard to say what's the one trait that I would like for Ausmus to take from Jim Leyland. Honestly, I think it would be, another thing I would bring up here is that I would like to see him being more smooth with the media, more receptive to the media, more willing to joke around and not be as condescending with the media, because that's a negative thing for all of us to look at from afar, Doc. And if you were in the clubhouse, maybe we will get the opportunity one day after a Tigers game to be in that clubhouse, Doc, at Comerica Park. And the thing is, I don't want to deal with a manager who's like that, who's bitter with the media or who's condescending with the media. And that's really how we can define Brad Ausmus throughout his managerial stint with the Tigers so far, is that he's been condescending most of the time with the media. And that's always a negative aspect of any manager, in my opinion, Doc.
No doubt about it. I'll have to have some editorial control over your questions because I probably will hear you say, so Brad, how come you're not Jim Leyland?
How come you're not? Yeah, I want to know. Why can't you take more traits from Jim Leyland and master them as your own? He's not willing to change. He is who he is. And guess what? Jim Leyland was stubborn in his ways too. You can't teach an old dog new tricks, right? The thing is with Brad Ausmus, which is very perturbing to me, is that Ausmus is a newer manager, a young mind, and you can't teach him new tricks. That's an issue right there, and that's why more than likely he will not make it with the Tigers for a 5th season as Tigers skipper. Now, wanted to also ask you about, now we reflected upon 06, 2012. The Tigers, I think, were experienced enough in 2012 to win a World Series title, the first since 1984. Now, here's a hypothetical. We both don't believe they'll make it to the Fall Classic in 2017. But if they did, don't you believe they would be well suited to win it all because they'd be due. They're long overdue. And this team is a veteran-laden ball club. That's my point here. If they did actually get there, would you have a high amount of hope and maybe a higher degree of hope than you did at least in 2012? Or no?
No. I think I would literally be shocked if the Detroit Tigers made a run in 2017. They basically have the same team, a similar, situation in the bullpen. I don't see drastic improvements in the outfield, and you're going to have a situation where maybe you have a youngster, being the guy each and every day in Jacoby Jones. So I just don't see. And plus, the monumental feat it would take probably to defeat the Cleveland Indians, barring any injuries. they got a guy in Andrew Miller that you have to like, you have to respect, because they're going to use him in the 5th, 6th inning. And the Detroit Tigers, in 2016 struck out a lot. They were a team that offensively were up and down. So if they made it to the World Series, I would literally be shocked, but I would love to see it. But it's one of those things where if it was going to be like that, we'd all have to be nervous, because they would be, I believe, if they were to get there, a team that's relying heavily on the 5 starters. So you would be gripping every time the opponent scored a run, because I think that for the Detroit Tigers to have success in 2017, they're going to have to be a defensive team and rely heavily on pitching.
Okay, Doc, so FanRag Sports came out with a projected lineup for the Tigers as they're previewing all these, Major League ball clubs leading into spring training. And the Tigers' projected lineup consists of Ian Kinsler at second base leading off, and the 2-hole JD Martinez in right field, and batting third, Miguel Cabrera at first, batting cleanup at DH, Victor Martinez, batting fifth, Jay Up in left field, batting number 6, Nick Castellanos at third base, batting 7th, Tyler Collins in center field, batting 8th, the catcher, James McCann, and batting 9th, Jose Iglesias at shortstop. Now, if you listen to anything I just said there, Doc, does that make you salivate at the mouth, that lineup, or not so much?
Not so much. Do you know what lineup makes me salivate? The Cleveland Indians lineup. Oh my goodness, with the additions they made with Encarnacion, with the bullpen that they have, the starters, Corey Kluber, I think they're going to be the class of the division. And I just really feel like, while I don't feel like the Tigers are going to lose 14 games to the Indians, you might be in the neighborhood of losing 9 or 10. I don't think that the Detroit Tigers are going to win the season series versus the Indians. I like the Detroit Tigers. I mean, it's a team that you can go out there and win some games, but the word, I guess, that you could describe as I sit here in early February talking about the Detroit Tigers is skeptical. I'm just a little bit skeptical that they're going to go out there and have success. I'm skeptical that a team that was similar in 2016 that's being thrown out there in 2017 is going to go out there and have more success. The guys are older. You're going to have a situation where you're going to be counting upon maybe younger players to do some things. And there's a lot of ifs and buts that we're talking about here. If Justin Upton can return to form, if JD Martinez can continue to maintain, if Miguel and Victor Martinez don't get hurt. You saw the report earlier that Victor Martinez was playing throughout 2016 with a sports hernia and had to have a procedure in the offseason.
So how do they let that happen, by the way, once again? It seems like they keep allowing VMAR to play through injuries extensively. They did in 2015, a hugely disappointing campaign for VMAR at the plate, too, and for the club as a whole. And you let him play through that at his advanced age. And then in 2016, through all the injuries, the extensive battle day in, day out that he had to go through battling the injury bug. You let him play through that. So 2 straight years he's battled injuries. And at this advanced age, they're significant because he's old. He is an old man now dealing with all that, Doc.
I stand corrected. According to the Detroit News, Avila revealed last week during a luncheon that Victor Martinez had a hernia, but he clarified it was not a sports hernia. There was no hole in the abdominal wall. So he had a hernia. It obviously is one of those things that can affect you, but
it lingers, though, and it probably affected him in the second half of the season. And they're going to downplay it now because they don't want to be called out for playing him through all of that. And if it's just a regular hernia, a sports hernia, I know it's different. I don't even know what the difference is. We should have a medical doctor on to describe the difference here. But it still, I know, isn't as severe.
And with Victor Martinez, he was still fairly productive, 27 home runs, 86 RBIs.
But in the first half.
The problem that we saw was he would hit massive bombs into the outfield, and he could only kind of linger to first base. He became a liability on the base paths because he couldn't get to second base. There were a lot of situations where many other people would have got doubles and triples, and he was just, grinding it out trying to get to first base. So that's where, obviously, if you have a hernia, it's a problem because we saw several times where he was wincing. It would look like
it was horrible watching.
It looked like an absolute struggle for him to try and get out there and run the bases. So you need to really hope that he can stay healthy in 2017.
He can't round out a double. You'd think he can even get to second, let alone getting a triple? It's not going to happen out of VMAR. Miguel Cabrera either. They are 2 big, slow dudes on the base paths, no doubt about it. And Tigers need to improve upon the base paths, too. Can they? Well, that's a topic for another day. Now, Tigers have to get younger. We described VMAR, how old he is now. And pitching-wise, they have. The rotation is one reason why I think as Tigers fans, Doc, you and I and everybody else out there can be excited about the Tigers 2017 campaign. It's led by JV, the veteran right-handed ace. And then you have Michael Fulmer, Jordan Zimmerman, who should be healthier, and that means much better on an every 5th-day basis. Daniel Norris, and then Matt Boyd. Now, in this FanRag Sports projected rotation for the Tigers in 2017. It has Anibal Sanchez currently in the rotation, penciled in as the number 4 starter. I don't like that whatsoever. Don't think it should be his spot to have. I think Matt Boyd should earn that and will do so in spring, proving that he is a better starting pitcher of the two. And I think you will end up having Matt Boyd as the number 5, Daniel Norris as the number 4. And if everybody's healthy, that 1 through 3 is very solid. JV, Fulmer, and Jordan Zimmerman. And that's a reason to be excited about the Tigers' chances in 2017. And another up-and-comer they have now in the minor league system is their top prospect right now in Matt Manning, a guy who just turned 19 on Saturday. So very much a youngster, younger than yours truly even. That makes me feel old, almost. And by far, like I said, the Detroit Tigers' best prospect. He was ranked number 74 on MLB.com's top 100 prospects list, which is done through MLBpipeline.com. And the guys that put in the reviews of these players are Jonathan Mayo and Jim Callis of MLBpipeline.com. And they said that Manning was around the strike zone a lot during his pro debut, and his athleticism should help him repeat his delivery. He gets high marks for his makeup, and that along with his stuff and projectability give him the ceiling of a frontline starter. Well, that's good news right there. The thing is, the Tigers are lacking position players significantly. What do they do from here on out with getting young position players in that can produce at the major league level on a full-time basis? The thing is, they're lacking in that department hugely, and that scares me as a Tigers fan. But with this lack of minor league depth, as noted by Matt Manning being the only prospect in the top 100 prospect list by many of these Major League Baseball prospect outlets, it tells me, Doc, that the Tigers, as I said before, are lacking minor league depth extremely. And it's a reason why they should get younger. And another reason why, if the Tigers fail to really succeed in the first half of the season, and specifically going into the trade deadline, I think they will boot on 2017 and truly attempt to retool and get younger for the future. Doc?
And it's not like Manning is ranked super high. He's ranked number 74.
Yep.
So it's not like he's like really lighting it up and many people are high on him. It is one of those things where Al Avila's job is going to be to retool this whole organization, to find ways to draft well and have guys that, hey, look what happened last year when the Tigers lost Nick Castellanos to injury for a significant period of time. They went to Casey McGee, and it was one of those things where he couldn't stay in the everyday lineup. You tried to use, a couple other guys in the rotation, and it just didn't work out. So when Nick Castellanos was out, it was one of those things where it was a drastic drop-off in offensive production. Why? When you go to the minors, you should be able to go out there and find a guy that can at least do something and not maybe be as productive as your everyday starter, but can go out there and maybe find a flash in the pan. When's the last time the Tigers found a flash in the pan that just came out of nowhere in obscurity and was able to become a Major League Baseball superstar? Maybe it's J.D. Martinez, but he didn't come from the Tigers organization. That's the most recent one. I mean, the last guy you could say that you probably brought up greatly was Justin Verlander.
Well, and Nick Castellanos. Now, position players, now the verdict's still out on Nick Castellanos. I think if he's healthy, he can hit 20-plus bombs. I think he really can do that in 2017, and that's a great thing for the Tigers if it does occur from Castellanos. Also, Curtis Granderson. But you have to go all the way back to, I believe he made his debut in 2005, played a few games, then, was a full-time starting center fielder in 2006. It's been a long time, and not many stud prospects have come up from the farm system that have been position players. They've been lacking in that department, Doc, for years and years, maybe even before you were a hardcore Tigers fan, like I have been for the longest time now. And because that's where my passion is with the Tigers, it's why it perturbs me so much. They have not had many young guys come through the farm system who have been able to produce on a consistent, everyday basis among position players, and they've got to solve that issue going forward. It's one thing they really have to address, to say the least, once they finally make the attempt to get younger, Doc.
And a couple quick hitters before we get out of here. Did you hear the news? Al Avila came out and said in 2018 they're not paying the luxury tax, that more cuts are coming financially.
Well, they want to get under the luxury tax for this season. I don't know how they're going to do it unless they trade Jose Iglesias, we talked about that, or somebody else. But if they don't want to trade anybody notable from the Major League roster going into opening day of this season, well, then they're not going to get under that luxury tax threshold, which is $195. They've exceeded the $195 mil luxury tax, so as of right now, and it's not a good thing because they'll be a two-time offender after doing it in 2016, and now it looks like in 2017. Not a good thing for the Tigers, Doc.
And I think right now we're about 2 weeks away from pitchers and catchers reporting to spring training. You're getting a little bit excited that this is about to get revved up?
February 13th, and that should be exciting times. It really should be. That's when, these teams are reporting, as I said earlier in the podcast, to Florida. Tigers, playing Lakeland, and then to Arizona as well. So it will be fun to see what the Tigers' makeup truly is and who makes the Major League roster out of spring training. And you had brought up the lack of depth. They had to bring up Casey McGee. Well, hey, now the Tigers have Omar Infante back in Motown. Come on, Doc. Be a little bit happy, excited, optimistic. You got Omar. You have Brendan Ryan. Okay, I'm joking here. I'm being very sarcastic. Those guys aren't reasons to be optimistic on 2017. And honestly, we'll have to see what happens in spring training and take what we see in spring training and, form that into our preview of the season. Because right now it's still the same for me with the Tigers. About a 79 to 83 win ball club with the AL wildcard being the best perspective that I can have on these 2017 Tigers, Doc.
Okay, final note. They've kind of talked about what Fox Sports Detroit's going to do for the broadcast team. Jack Morris is the odd man out. Kirk Gibson and Rod Allen will be the rotating color guys, and Mario Pemba obviously will do the play-by-play. But Jack Morris is going to be working exclusively with Fox Sports North, Minnesota, FSN, and so he won't be back. And kind of like when I thought about it, I kind of liked what Craig Monroe was doing a little bit, but...
You did? Really? You're not just saying that? That's the company line you're riding here, even though you're not part of Fox Sports?
I thought Craig Monroe was getting better, and he was doing his thing when the Tigers would go on the road later in the season, but he's going to be probably exclusively, held back in the studios. But, in terms of the broadcast team, I would say that probably the best two are Rod Allen and Mario Pemba. Just keep it through and through. Maybe you have special guests here and there for an inning or two, but I don't know. I'm not really down with Kirk Gibson all that much in terms of what he can do. Jack Morris, it's one of those things where, okay, he's gone, but I'm not going to miss him too much.
Nobody's going to miss him. Now, people would miss Gibby. I'll say that much. Now, you're not down for the cause with Gibby, though. You like the continuity between Rod Allen and Mario Pemba, but they don't like each other. Remember that? We've heard that many times now. Now, on the interweb, which we can't totally believe, a lot of it's fake news, by the way, as our president has said numerous times now about media outlets out there. But anyways, on a truthful note here, I will not miss Jack Morris myself. Even though he's a Tigers legend, I respect him, but hey, go enjoy the Twins broadcast and those lowly Twins in 2017.
The only time I'll miss Kirk Gibson was when I had a hard day and I was trying to fall asleep, because I
he can put you to sleep.
Turn on a Tigers game on a West Coast thing at like 10:45 and be like, we're going to have this situation here where they're going to be on second and third with one man out. I'm like,
if your sleeping medication can't do it for you, hey, prescribe to an inning. Or how about a full game of Kirk Gibson, right? Or maybe just an inning of Gibby. It was tough this past season, and hopefully he's a little bit more entertaining, but I think he'll be the same mundane Kirk Gibson in 2017, Doc.
Would it be overtly insulting if we just sent him like maybe 5 packages of like Monster and just
to re-energize? Yeah, take these before the next broadcast you do because you'll need them, buddy.
To Kirk Gibson from the Detroit Sports Podcast Network, 5 cases of Monster. Please consider implementing this as a supplement to your broadcast skills. Sincerely,
it could be like his PEDs, right?
Sincerely, Vito.
Oh, that's just not me, not on you. You won't own up to it, even though it's your idea. You would do that to me, wouldn't you? But I guess you can as the podfather of this very podcast and the podcast network that is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. Doc, and everybody out there with that, thanks for tuning into this episode, this fine edition of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company, and tune in next week for another fresh edition of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. Talk to you then. Goodbye.